had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.
Ask Me Live.
So, I was, we've looked, we kind of picked out something that we could use as a new show cover
vibe.
And I'm like, do we do it? Or do we just keep the lo-fi, just like, we gave a fuck, but we kind of just did it quickly?
Yeah.
Vibe that we went with originally.
Especially the header.
Been doing it for 2 years. We haven't changed it.
Yeah.
It's worked great up to this point. Why mess with it?
Yeah.
Like, we can make it look more polished or whatever. Why?
Right.
Like, what is that going to add? And so this is a real question because, there's obvious things where it's like, well, you could do like this, you could do merch, or maybe it would be more visual in the podcast, app and whatever.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I can't, and the problem that I'm facing is I can't make a good argument that fits the spirit of why we do these things in the first place.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I'm like, maybe we just leave it alone.
Well, I'm curious what, I felt like you kind of took the lead on a refresh and started presenting some ideas about a new look or, new imagery or whatever. What do you have any idea what brought it about? Was it
originally we had an idea that each season we would do a different vibe.
Yeah. A different look.
We could do like the Western thing, and that kind of just traces the progress of the show and puts different time periods on things. And I still don't hate that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still open to that idea. But then also, like, why change it?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like...
Yeah.
It's not like this is hurting and, like, it could help a little, like, oh, maybe it helps us get X more viewers or something. But it's like if you're not watching or listening, I mean, yeah, part of it is just because you haven't discovered it yet, but who cares? Like, people can discover it whenever they discover it. We're just going to continue to, like, do our thing.
Mm-hmm.
So great. If you discover it 2 years from now, then you'll have all of that content from the last, the last 2 years and then the next 2 years. And then you can jump on for the journey. It's like, people will discover it whenever they discover it, whenever the time's right for them. And then, if it's kind of about the conversations we're having, not about what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my argument against it, I guess.
Yeah. And I, while I liked the process of making new imagery and kind of exploring it and all that, I do feel like there was something kind of, I don't want to say nagging, but just something under the surface that was going, do we really need to change anything?
What are we doing?
What for? I mean, it looked cool and I was excited to implement the new look, but part of me goes, what's the...
Are we just changing it to change it?
Yeah. And I'm curious about what forces are at play that would bring that about. Is it, and not saying that this is what happened, but is it the playbook? Is it, a need for novelty? Is it, the feeling like the show's evolving and you want to align the imagery of the show and the quote unquote brand with that evolution? I don't know.
I think, I think we're better suited with just the focus being on the content, not the presentation.
Right.
Because it wasn't ever supposed to really be about the presentation. And, you look at a bottle of whiskey and sometimes, some of these really renowned brands have this excellent presentation. There's nothing wrong with with an excellent presentation.
But I was just watching
Johnny Walker,
the little video about Maker's Mark dipping the neck of the bottle in wax. Every bottle's hand dipped in hot red wax, which is super cool.
Yeah.
But elaborate.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was an original. Maybe that's like I was using these cameras and it was just something that stuck.
Right.
But.
And that's the thing. You change that stuff.
Yeah.
If we change cameras or if we potentially change the look of it.
Well, I was getting caught up in this kind of false idea of progress.
Right. Yeah.
Which I feel like we've maybe railed against a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not in like a Luddite destroy the machines kind of way, but
right.
Just in the sense of, okay, is this actually improving the product?
Yeah.
We talked on the phone yesterday about the schools that were like, oh, we're going to invest $50 million in the school district. And every school will have 5 computers or 4 computers in each classroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, could you have just maybe paid the teachers,
right,
more money and trained them or, required more skills to teach out of that 50 million? And would the result have been like, did the kids get much smarter because you gave them access to computers? Probably not. Could you have just invested that in the teachers and probably had a greater impact? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're having the conversation of, I don't want to be a Johnny Walker where it's, oh, well, the whiskey's fine, but the reputation, and look at how beautiful the brand is. And you go to the factory and it's, or the distillery, and it's, this amazing tour and all of this and that. And it's like, but is the whiskey good? Right. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we come back to it in like a year or two to see, but.
Yeah. And I did like what you came up with, and how we, my input and all that kind of led us to that look. And I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
And that we gave it, which is kind of room to breathe. There was no feeling, which is what kind of happens to me. Think it, feel it, make it, send it, like you're so amped up about this thing that you made that it's just like you implement it without a little bit of objectivity or a moment to breathe and go,
what are we
a clear
here?
head. Like what is at play in wanting to do this, and is it the best thing to do? And when we started recording this episode, we're sitting here going, what are we going to talk about? And, and part of me is it's interesting that, again, we've had a range of things where sometimes an episode with what we call pre-show, which is our conversation before we roll cameras, we just kind of arrive at something really interesting to talk about, or, we might come in with something that we've been reading or watching or whatever it is, and we start a conversation on that, which kind of gets us to a common thread or a shared idea, and then we can kind of launch into the podcast from there. I thought it was interesting, and that's why I kind of pushed us to start rolling, to just be like, we don't know what we're going to talk about. And the other thing that's interesting to me is, especially in the shadow of finishing Neil Postman's book, amusing ourselves to death, that this thing inside of me, as with my own YouTube channel and all the talk about providing value and whatnot, this feeling oftentimes of not wanting to, but some thought, and I don't think I'd ever act on it or encourage us to consider acting on it, is we need to make this a show. Like, this needs to be a show. And that doesn't mean like in tonight's opening segment, blah, 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 or, and I think there certainly are good shows that have that. I enjoy Real Time with Bill Maher, the Daily Show when the Weekly Show when Jon Stewart hosts it, stuff like that has structure and, something that, like an opening monologue, and then we're going to go into this stuff, the fun, and then a wrap up or an interview or whatever. we're not, our sort of show is the conversation we have, whether it's, I feel this way about this, let's talk about it, or I don't know how I feel about that, let's work through it.
Well, it's like if we turn this into a show, I think we would do 5 episodes and then we would never do it again.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, because we've talked about it before, but this serves us in a way.
Yeah.
Like, there's something very selfish in here. It's not
self-indulgent like we were talking about.
Yeah, but it's not,
and not
like this. The self-indulgence that comes from us doing this isn't, some following or like, it's not an external thing, but both of us get value from it. It's like, challenging to pick up new ideas or look through different perspectives and shift through worldviews and hold ourselves accountable on the work we're creating or the lack thereof, or work through psychological tensions, or there's a benefit that we get. If we turn it into a show, you might be able to incorporate bits and pieces of that, but you would lose that. And then also just the people that actually do pay attention to this. There's plenty of shows out there.
Sure. Yeah.
This isn't one of them.
Yeah, this is about nothing.
No.
I just a Seinfeld reference because I can't not contextualize this in terms of
popular
culture.
Knew the explanation of where the show about nothing came from, I'm upset.
Well, yeah, right. Sure, there might be a few. But remember too, and hold your thought. The big thing was, we would sit down, grab coffee, hang out here, whatever it was, and these conversations would just happen.
Yeah.
And I think we would come out of them inspired. We'd come out of them satisfied. The volleying back and forth of ideas, exploring things, not knowing how we feel about it, you shaping my opinion or perspective on it, and vice versa. And I think, again, when we had those conversations, it wasn't like we were like on the phone ahead of time or sitting down on our own going, what should we talk about this in our next conversation? That's not filmed, that's not recorded. What should I talk about with Alex? There were probably some preparation, like, I just read this thing. Alex might be interested in that. Or I watched this video. I might want to share that with Alex. So there's sort of like an exchange of ideas or a sharing of stuff, but there's no formulation of this thing and then roll cameras, let's get into it. And I think the self-indulgence to a certain extent is, other than what bubbles up in what we're reading, what we're watching, what we're experiencing, we're not like tasked with sort of this homework every week of pre-producing the show. And
which,
then,
if there was, I doubt either one of us would.
Right, that's exactly
it
like,
wouldn't happen.
So is what we're doing here better because of it, or ultimately is what we end up doing? And I'm asking more.
I think it's like it's completely non-linear. It's not better or it just is.
It just is, right?
This is what it is. The whole intention of us, recording the thing and putting it out was, we always left the conversation feeling pretty charged up. Yeah. Enthusiastic.
Having gotten value out of it.
Happy. Yeah. And not maybe not in like a one-to-one value sense, but just in, we're leaving these conversations with a little brighter.
Yeah. Better.
Just whatever that euphoric feeling is when things are going the right way.
Right.
And I, personally, I was like, man, I want access to this.
Right.
Or I bet there's people out there, at least a couple of people that would get the same euphoric feeling.
Yeah.
So then you create a digital proxy, which is a podcast, and you put it out there, and, there's probably just as many people that would completely hate this or not get anything out of this,
right?
Or leave it not,
what is this? This isn't anything.
But for the people that do, I'm sure that it means a lot to. And you go and turn this into a show or something and start putting these artificial boundaries on it. It's gonna lose all of its all of its value to anybody.
If we did make this a little bit more of a show, even if it was something as simple as we're coming in with a hot take or a thesis, one that comes at us,
Hot take.
and I don't mean necessarily you and I each have a hot take, but like a subject comes up, we're given a prompt, whatever it is. Like, what would a show version of this even look like?
Every other show
that we would be even vaguely interested in.
See, but I think there's this. I don't know how to define a show, but we've developed our own tendencies and formatting, without even realizing it.
Right.
You can go back and watch the last 39, 40 episodes, and I'm sure there's a progression.
Right.
It's like if you take 1,000 photographs and you're interacting with, I took 100, I'm interacting, took another 100, I'm interacting with those, and I'm learning from those, or I'm taking things out of that. It's going to slowly evolve. You're going to have things that you go back to. You're going to have.
That's right.
I'm sure that's there.
You're going to have patterns that develop.
And what is a show but just patterns? It's just
sort of predetermined patterns almost.
And we're just kind of figuring out ours from scratch, and I'm sure it'll continue to evolve. And episode 1 will probably look a lot different from episode 50. Episode 50, I would wager, will probably be different from 100. But what I heard this quote, it's like if you're real, then your art grows with you. Like if you're completely transparent and you're just real and you're not trying to project any kind of false sense of the idealistic version of yourself or whatever that is,
right,
then your art will grow with you. Because you're only making what you can make in that moment. You're not trying to. So I kind of think this is a good summation of this. This is just us, what we've got right now at the current moment, and we're just sticking to that pretty much 100% for some reason or another, and it grows with us. I mean, you're a different person 40 episodes ago. I'm a different person. Of course we are. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah. I'm just really fascinated with where doing this comes from. Like why, just that idea of these are really good conversations that we have. Like I selfishly want to document them, but I also think it'd be cool to share them. And there's not any deeper strategic playbook, show business, what others have, there's no deeper thought about it other than let's hang out and talk about what's going on and see where it goes. And I don't know, I'd be curious if there were other shows like that, podcasts, whatever, how I would react.
I'm sure there are.
I'd be curious if anybody, has seen other things like that.
I'm sure
to share them,
probably pretty small like ours too.
Yeah.
Like I think you just kind of organically develop a
right. And I mean, like if you think about it, some of my favorite podcasts, like obviously, if you watch. Just in general, like a Joe Rogan podcast, a Smartless podcast, a Rick Rubin podcast, they have a general idea based on the guest, sort of things that they're curious about, especially because they're getting to know each other sometimes for the first time, right? And maybe with someone like a Joe Rogan interviewing a prominent figure, like there's sort of like, well, we got to hit on these things because it's part of the cultural zeitgeist right now, where my audience is going to be frustrated if we don't mention this thing that is, happening right now. What's interesting about us is obviously we're friends. We've been friends for a long time. And, I don't need to like well, how did you start out as a photographer? How did you start out?
Yeah.
And, we don't need to do the origin story, every time we have an episode. So you have a different experience where you are sort of doing an origin story because you're really peeling back these layers, especially me being so like treating this sometimes like a bit of therapy. But
we're also just not very funny people. Like, I think there's a lot of podcasts where you have two buddies that have known each other for a long time. And it is more of a comedy podcast, and they're just really funny.
And there's certain, friends of mine where, my comedy tendencies come up more than with you. And that doesn't mean that I don't crack jokes from it, especially when we're off camera. But I'm attracted to you in our conversations because, a lot of it's grounded in, the work that we do or the work that we consume of others, the books that we're reading, and to a certain extent, especially with me, just talking about, psychological aspects of, why we as people or me as a person does what I do on a daily basis. And I don't know that I get to talk about that with too many other people because I'm usually the one hearing from them why they do stuff or why they're struggling with this or that. So it is interesting and for me to be able to relate it to making work or creating content or doing the show or, pursuing the arts, all of that stuff and the struggles that come up for me, especially in the context of books that we're reading, novels that we're reading, shows that we're watching, movies that we're consuming, etc. And just to double back to that sort of the patterns that develop, we have episodes where it is a little bit more about why do I do this? I as in us or me as in me personally. Like, why am I drawn to this or why do I make these choices? Why do I want to post this or make a video that's like this? Why do I want to talk about these things in this sort of public forum? Or, we just read, a book on hauntology and we're going to go, we're just going to basically have an exchange about what our takeaways were from it. And you're going to illuminate things maybe I overlooked and vice versa and just go ham on it.
I think it's interesting. One thing you said about the public forum is like, both of us are probably private people in a sense, but I'm like pretty. I think my personality type is just pretty private, reserved.
Absolutely.
In most things, and it is funny. I don't really think about this as being a public forum, but it totally is. Yeah. That's just it's interesting to me that
sort of ends up in one, although I don't.
It's not, and I don't have that connection until you point it out in an obvious way. Like, oh, this is a public forum.
Right.
It's like, there's definitely other people that aren't us watching or listening. And maybe that's just better that I just, push that out and don't really think about that.
But I do think that part of why I talk about some of those more psychological things, why I do this or this struggle with this or whatever is because that's what I crave to hear in the content I consume. But in a way where it's not, again, self-indulgent or masturbatory, like, oh, I just got to unload all my stuff because I just need to clear up the blockages and I need to signal that I'm working on things and all of that. I'm sure there's some motivations in there, conscious or subconscious, that, some might observe and be like, this guy really likes to talk about himself or sort of what he's going through or what his struggles are. But I think I'm drawn to that too, going back to this idea of like making a show, because sometimes consciously, sometimes I think subconsciously, this is the type of stuff I want to hear from other people. And I think for me, one thing when I listen to podcasts and listen to people talk, whether it's a Rick Rubin or, and somebody he's interviewing, a Smartless, whatever, I'm always going, you all have reached this level of success, a high level of success to varying degrees, right? Character actor, and and this or that, a prolific music producer. Some people, their sort of artistic footprint is much more vast. Some it's a little bit smaller as far as the real estate they occupy in show business. But I've always been like, where are the podcasts about the people that are like in the middle, struggling?
They just have such low viewership.
Yeah, right. But then part of me also goes, if they're out there though, how do I find them? Mm-hmm. What tools are there to have somebody be like, hey, you should check out this podcast from these sort of, I don't know, normal is not the right word, but people that are that are in the thick of it, or they're not. And not to take away from the people I'm referring to, Rick Rubin or those guys on SmartLess, because they're in a struggle.
I like how it's Rick Rubin and those guys on SmartLess. So
these are the two podcasts I've been listening to most in the last couple of weeks. Although I have a range of them that I listen to, it's like right there at the forefront. But where are those? Where's that community with people that are in a similar situation to me? Yeah. And maybe talking about the things I talk about is, there's some hope that you're going to connect with them and that they're making stuff too that I can then go watch, listen to, or consume.
Yeah.
It's a big, long point about
it's probably a good opportunity to ask for, if anybody knows anybody else that's kind of doing similar things, or, I mean, I don't think it's an if. I mean, I know there's just
absolutely
there's people out there that do things, but I do think there could be a bit of self-selection happening, or just if you don't really just care about doing the thing for the thing, like podcasting is a medium that draws. I think there's probably 50 million people who have done an episode of a podcast. I don't know. I just
made one or been a guest, just participated in a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but most podcasts, most people are probably doing that because they hear of podcasting, whatever that is, as this pathway towards
part of the playbook,
fame or money.
Influence.
There's not a deep, maybe that's not a good way of putting it, but there's not a reason to do it. They're not compelled to do it.
Right.
If you take away the potential for fame or for money. And so
is
maybe you have 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And then how many of our friends do we know that have done 4 episodes of a podcast?
Yeah.
I'd wager a lot of them, or X amount of YouTube videos.
Right.
They, you do it for a little bit, for 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, and then you don't see success, and so you lose the motivation.
Right.
I mean, it's probably the same kind of thing that leads people to start a gym membership or something.
That's
like
exactly
that.
Right. Yeah. Ambitious. I always call it.
You're not doing it as a practice. You're doing it as a means to.
That's right. Yeah. You want to cultivate an external result, but there's not. I don't know if this is the right language to use, but sort of that intrinsic motivation. Like I do this.
Yeah.
I do this no matter what. Like this is non-negotiable.
And so maybe it just, a lot of the people that start podcasts, where it's the people, it almost does, position itself as a medium of extremes, because you do 1 or 2 episodes and you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
Well, then you stop.
Yeah.
Or you do, and I mean, there's plenty of podcasts out there that I've listened to where it's 2 guys talking about movies or something, that they did the thing for a decade.
Yeah.
And they probably never had huge viewership, but they just did it because they love the thing. And those are great. Those are great podcasts. But yeah, I think there's probably a large majority of people that stop doing the thing after. How many, I think of YouTube photography channels or something. How many channels are there where somebody did, 4 videos about
Right. And they didn't go viral, so they stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. That brings up an interesting point. Think about how many things in your life, my life, that we have set out to do, and it doesn't stick. You get to a point where it's like, I don't want to do this. I feel like I should, but I don't want to. And that doesn't mean that, you don't have certain areas where you form discipline and you in something makes you push through the I don't want to do this because you should. You made a commitment, or you have a goal that you're hoping to achieve, and you stick with it. The crazy thing about this, how many episodes have we done? 40, whatever this is. There has never been one instant where we've talked about getting together to do this, and I've been like, oh, fuck.
Well, see that, and that's I think, and that to me, if there's any motivation to keep doing it, it's that.
And that to me is like a when I think about, like we talked about purity in a lot of early episodes, or sort of like like you can't argue the perfection of that. Like I never have been like, oh, God damn it. What can I do to get out of it this week? I don't really feel like it. Whatever.
Well, and you talk about like how many
I bend over backwards to make it happen.
How many things have we picked up and dropped in the last since we started this thing?
Absolutely. I
mean, just personally, like, there's not a lot of things in my life that I do on a consistent basis.
Yeah,
there's just not.
Right.
There's everything that I consider adding. I'm both of us, I think, are at a point where you add something, you probably have to sacrifice something else.
Right.
And there's just not a lot that I'm willing to pull away from.
Yeah.
There's certainly some things that I'd like to pursue here and there, but
yeah,
it's just, there's something amazing about the fact that it has been frictionless, and I think that's why we do hear from people that watch and they're just like, wow, where did this come from?
Yeah.
You can't start intellectualizing or like trying to create some kind of framework around that, or else you'll lose that. Like it just is what it is. And as soon as we try to kind of grasp it, I think that's how you lose it.
Well, I think this kind of brings back full circle the potential change to the look, the vibe,
that's almost trying to grab it or observe it.
Well, to me, it's like it's a little bit of like, well, don't mess with it. Like don't mess with the secret sauce. Don't change the whatever. Like just the simple fact that two people will bend over backwards to have a conversation, roughly once a week or twice every couple of weeks, however it shakes out.
A couple times a month. Yeah.
Is that something special enough that like that's the show?
Yeah.
It's two people who really want to talk to each other.
Just having a conversation.
Within not like a chosen framework in a sense, but sort of like the framework is determined by the fact that we have these common interests that we have certainly a lot of different things between us, our ages, our kids, no kids, YouTube, no YouTube, job, traditional job, non-traditional, all that stuff. But still, there's shared interest, photography and, art and cinema and writing and expressing ideas and making a podcast.
It's just
is that the show? Like, so don't fucking, okay, in this segment, Alex is going to do a monologue and now we're going to do our, 5 cool things. And
my favorite thing was always, we had this like wood table in college and, I don't know. It's just like my down home country roots. But there's nothing better than just sitting at a table and just having a conversation over some drinks or over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like there's literally nothing like that is one of the best parts about being human.
Well,
it's one of the greatest joys that I have on this, like existing on this planet.
Yeah.
Is sitting across the table from a person or a group of people that I care about and just catching up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all I care about. Like, that's all I want to get. Come on over. I'll make you a cup of coffee and we'll sit down. Like, that's it. That's the entire, if we can just capture that, then we got it. And that's almost the art project of this, or like is just trying to capture that. How do we strip out all of the layers of artificial? And we do a pretty decent job at it at this point, in not really thinking about, I mean, obviously this is a very meta episode where we're talking about the stupid shit while we're doing the stupid shit, and then like we're looking and referencing the cameras. It's a very, this is an exercise, I guess, but it's
still it's centered around like sort of like the nature of making something, and sort of the where making something comes from, especially in a collaborative setting where you have two people, where there's a lot of potential for it to fall apart.
Yeah. And you strip every, like, candles are candles. We have fire, we have water, we have a solid table, we have some comfortable chairs. We're in the same space every time, pretty much.
Yep.
Sometimes it's morning, sometimes it's afternoon, sometimes it's evening. You use the medium close up. Right. You've got the square frame, so you don't have all, like, it's just what's
standard
in focus
definition.
Is in focus. Standard definition for ease more than anything, just for like ease of
data.
Create a frictionless process, and then it's just sit down and have a conversation. I think that's like the exciting thing of trying to capture that. It's almost like this is a, you told me a couple of weeks ago that somebody left the project, or left a comment, about like make a movie, or
it wasn't like stop sitting there talking, go make a movie. It was just basically like, you guys seem like you're two smart, talented guys, like you should.
But this is part of that. Like this is this is like Linklater makes Boyhood, and it's the same. Right. This is a film project.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be incredibly clear week to week, episode to episode, but I'll tell you what, in 5 years, it's going to be incredibly clear.
Yeah.
In 20 years,
which even when you say that, even if you say that, I'm like, I could go 20 years.
If we can maintain, obviously forces of nature aside, that is a project in and of itself.
Yeah.
And if we could go 20 years and manage to just make it all look the same from the start, sound the same from the start, the only thing that, I don't think we're going to go 20 years into space. Unfortunately, I would love to. I don't know if that's in the cards. But like that is a film. That's an amazing film.
Yeah.
Just
it's a cool
two
story.
Guys sitting down exploring. Yeah,
it's a cool story. Just like, you guys sat there like once.
Oh man,
basically every week, and had a several hour long conversation.
100 episodes. It's over 100 hours. Of conversation.
That's right.
That somebody could watch and trace, and
that's
cool to me. And just capturing what it feels like to sit across the table from somebody you care about and have a conversation about whatever. We're not just having a conversation about whatever. We're having a conversation about a theme, in a sense, loosely.
Yeah, but for me at least, I'm like, I want to learn something, or I want to explore something that opens a door or illuminates a dark part of the cave, of my understanding of things, whether it's myself or the world around me. And of course, that is part of what fuels it as well. Because if you think about it, I have lots of conversations with people to varying degrees of the varying degrees of impact or value or takeaway or whatever you want to call it. And there are some people where you're having a conversation and other forces are at play, and you're like, I got to get going, my kids are, whatever. Or you want to exit the conversation, not because that person is, there's something wrong with them or whatever, but maybe you're just not connecting in the best way, or you're sort of, oh yeah, dude, yeah, that's super cool, man, yeah. Oh, tell me about, like you're kind of going through the
your
motions
mind is
a little
elsewhere.
bit. Yeah, and that's a one extreme. But then this to me is another extreme where you are drawn to talk to that person. You seek out those conversations and that exploration and that illumination. You showing me new books, me showing you, texting videos or this or that, and they're not all going to be, like I'm going to immediately start reading that or I'm going to go watch that right away. But that's something that in all of the conversations I have with people, is somewhat unique to you and I. Now, I can have a lot of conversations with my buddy Nick, my buddy Chris, and sometimes it's a little one-sided, more of them to me, more of me to them. Obviously, sometimes these conversations are one-sided, especially the ones where I'm working through some psychology and whatnot, and you're listening, and asking questions here and there. But I just don't want to make, not that you are, but I don't want to make light of how profound of a thing that is. And again, going back to the catalyst or the impetus to make a show, quote unquote, around it. That to me is a very special thing to be the center of documenting what we're doing, a friendship, conversations, exploration, all of that stuff.
I think and that's a good way to put it. I mean, I think at least in my mind, I do see this more of a documentary project. Yeah. I think this is a long-term documentary film project in my mind, rather than a podcast or a talk show or something. Mm-hmm. So when it's like, oh, can we make it a show? It's like, no, because then it's not a documentary anymore. And it's, that's not to say that we won't make other things. Yeah. But, I like keeping this as a there's no reason that we have to stop making this to make another thing. Yeah. But this is a project. This is a documentary film project. Yeah. And, we've been in production for 80 weeks. Yes. Or whatever.
So there's an interesting thing that my brain does as the chopper.
That is,
I don't know if we've ever had this. Takes me back to being in Los Angeles where the helicopters were nonstop. So my brain works a lot in ideas, like ideas bubbling up that are sort of a setup for a story. As much as I, have strayed away from screenwriting, I still think of a lot of things in the context of what's the left turn that this situation could take that would make this a really fascinating story. And I have had, they're not dark thoughts, but I think they're a little bit dark, but thoughts of you hatching a plan to lure me into this years long podcast where you seemingly, just with good intentions and all this, to have these conversations and draw all this shit out of me, talking about myself or this or that. And at the end, you have crafted this film, documentary or whatever. That's not like a takedown of me, this guy's a fucking piece of work, but just like a character study or portrait.
The super long game. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it is kind of what's happening here, but it's for both of us.
But to me,
I've told you since the beginning, I think one of the biggest appeals to me for what we're doing is I want, our kids to be able to go back and just watch week to week where was their headspace in regard to this thing. And so yeah, it is kind of a character study, but there's nothing like.
I know, but what would be, like I think of like the Andy Kaufman version of what would come out of this, like the big twist reveal or whatever. Like there's something fascinating to me about that story. Like I'm not communicating that because I actually have a fear that that's what someone would do to someone else, or that's what you would do.
Well, it is what is happening. Like that is the thing. But
that next step of taking all of this footage and everything that has come from these, while you, in a sort of deceptive way, have tricked me into thinking it's safe for me to talk about this or say these things, and that you then take what was given to you and create this character portrait that where you sort of like assess who I am, good or bad, and put it into the form of a 90-minute film or whatever that, you submit to a film festival and it's like a big deal. It's like what, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like a bombshell for me because I'm going, holy shit, this person that I trusted in, so
just completely.
But I think of that as
too much emphasis on like the self there though. Like there is no like that's, that's Matthew O'Brien approaching the situation, right? That's like your conscious self approaching the situation and clearly putting these like, oh man, I will be used, and like, I will be the subject. And it's like, that's not as interesting as just like what this looks like over 10 years. I
completely agree.
Like that's a very like finite version of what this actually is going to be, or could be.
I think what I'm getting at is it's essentially a pitch of a story idea. Like not like actually let's go figure this out, but I'm like, that would be an interesting story like this, a film or something about someone doing that.
Can you imagine how much work it would be to go through and make a supercut of everything we've done? So that's an AI project if I've ever.
Right. Or my character looking back on all the things that you were filming outside of the podcast. Like, were you walking around with a camcorder? Like you talked about, like going to the estate sales with me and having and filming some of it.
I want to grab footage of
exactly. Like you see these things that I'm doing, and you're like, and again, you present that you want to document it for a purpose that I am amenable to, but ultimately it's a deception to do this other thing. And not necessarily that you're like, Matt's a piece of shit and I want to document how he sucks as a human, but just sort of like the end result is I've spent 7 years with this guy making podcasts and filming him and doing stuff, and here's who he is.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fascinating? Like that would be a movie that would be, I don't know. Like there's something interesting about that.
See, that's not as interesting to me as what I feel like this is, which is like, this is, well, no. And
no, I'm agree.
Not saying like what this is, like this is a movie that I love. It's Louis Malle, My Dinner with Andre.
I haven't seen it.
And it's essentially this. This is it. It's a conversation, and like the they're getting different courses brought in, but they're just having a conversation over dinner, and it kind of steps up to that. And there's other films that have done this. I can give them to show notes or whatever. There's one where it's like a politician and a poet and I mean, there's other films that have attempted this, and it's like
recurring conversations and
it's
see how
just
things
a dialogue
evolve over time.
Or whatever. And between people, it's essentially a podcast, but it's a film.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that My Dinner with Andre, I feel like did it the best. It towed the line without crossing over into like pretentious garbage. The best. I'm not saying that this isn't pretentious garbage. But this is when Louis Malle made that film, that was yes, the ideas are a little more focused.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a little more thoughtful
or intentional,
or just it's more boiled down. It's like the core essence of like, here's some ideas, here's a progression.
Yeah.
But that was the format. He was a filmmaker, and that was the format that he could use at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you gotta make it into like a 90-minute, 2-hour cut, and it's interesting. Now we can just upload an hour every 2 weeks to the internet.
Yeah.
And, we pay our hosting fees. It can live there forever.
Right.
We have all of this on like drives. It's on the cloud. Like this is all recorded. And, theoretically we keep paying our hosting fees. Like it's always going to be there.
Right.
And so this is like the natural progression of that project, of My Dinner with Andre. It's now, is it it as beautiful?
Sure.
Is it as, well blocked, or maybe not, but
we also don't know what it is, because,
and is it as deep and like it's boiled down to its essence? No, but there's going to be so much more depth. If you look at, if we hypothetically, we did 1,000 episodes over 20 years.
Yeah.
25 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's a life. Nobody will ever go through that, but that's an interesting project. Somebody might. Probably not. I doubt it.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting way to.
But it's at least something that's interesting to
document time and
to stumble across. I mean, can you imagine right now if you came across a video library of
25 years of my dad's life,
you found out that your dad or a grandpa or whoever, maybe not even someone related to you, a complete stranger, recorded 20 years of conversations with the same person over and over again, and again within a relative framework, a general subject matter, art and the life as a creative, that's kind of what our bucket is.
A filmmaker. I'm gonna just go get my letter glass real quick. Just because this is a good recommendation. So there's a filmmaker who did something similar. We'll kill two birds with one stone here too, because the other film I was referencing was Mind Walk with the politician and the poet and
I'm thinking too about the filmmaker that did the kids in school, and every 7 years, I know you're not thinking of this, but there's that documentary series where like every 7 years he visited with the same kids from this class, where he first met them when they were, like in kindergarten, and every 7 years he would go back and talk to them all, and see where they were in their lives and what was going on with them.
Yeah.
My wife and I watched that, and I
feel like I'm
blanking on what the heck it was called. Anyway,
yeah, I'm not.
That was an interesting project. Just in I'm going to visit with these same people every 7 years and document it. Yeah,
the one I'm thinking of is I think his name is Jonas Mekas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if Mekas is how the last name's pronounced. Mekas. I've only read it. I've never watched an interview of him or anything. But the movie I'm thinking of is as I was moving ahead, occasionally I saw brief glimpses of beauty, and he has a ton of projects. Reminiscence of a Journey to Lithuania, diaries, notes, and sketches. I mean, it's just...
And these are all documentary projects.
Yeah, but like, we're talking... So as I was moving ahead, occasionally I saw brief glimpses of beauty. It's like 288 minutes. It's 30 years of private home movie footage.
Oh, wow.
Edited together to create a project.
That's cool.
So 30 years of somebody's life edited together. And it's like an amazing achievement.
It's fascinating to think about like what is the...
But
what are some of the through lines and themes that come up, like distilling all that down to 288 minutes, and whether it tells a story or just presents, I obviously haven't seen it and to know what it feels like, but that's fascinating to me.
So he was born in 1922.
Yeah.
He was in a Nazi labor camp, crazy crazy life. I'm not sure if he's passed or he might still be alive.
22, yeah. He'd be 100 years old.
103, yeah. Let's see.
Which would be, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the work is crazy.
And I wonder too, like, you know, like that's the thing, like those long sustained projects, you know, I think particularly with somebody who's an individual who's executing it, it's more conceivable to me.
Passed away on January 23rd, 2019.
Okay, so didn't quite make it to 100.
Yeah. Crazy.
But you know, the sort of the drive, the fact that it's a sort of a non-negotiable that I'm going to document and have these home movies and all that stuff. Because I can't imagine it's just sort of like what I captured what I just happened to capture naturally without thinking of it maybe being a project.
See, but I think
we have lots of,
there's something to it where it's like you talk about being compelled to do something or to like this. We're compelled to record this and sit down, and you know, you start working through, like, he was probably just compelled to like, I doubt he was like, this is going to be some grand project
potentially,
because then you're pulled out of the moment. You're not experiencing, like, I think you recognize the potential.
Yes.
You recognize the significance of each passing moment.
Yeah.
And then you recognize the significance of each passing moment in the context
Absolutely,
of, you know, I mean, he lived for 100 years.
Right.
Like, and so when you have all of those things, then you kind of look at it in a way where it's, you're doing the thing.
Yeah.
And you know that there is the potential for it to be something greater or something.
Right.
But then it's also just like, you're just recording the episode.
Yeah. And I think what I'm getting at is the probability of someone following through on that as an individual. I'm compelled, or, you know, I'm going to document these things. The potential for someone to falter on that commitment is less than when two people are involved.
Yeah.
And I'm not meaning for this to be self-congratulatory. Look how amazing Alex and I are that we've made this commitment, because
no, it's easier because you're accountable.
But the other crazy thing though is, and look, this is like a love fest here between the two of us, but it's crazy to me that it's effortless. I literally don't ever think for a second, how do I get out of it this week? Well, and dude, I try to get out of a lot of shit.
I do get out of a lot.
And I do get out of a lot of shit.
Yeah. No, for sure. I agree. But I do think there's some invisible force that just kind of,
right.
If you can see, like, if certain qualities align, like, he's definitely getting something out of the observation in the moment of just recording things.
And I think that's what's interesting about this. And I don't know if it comes through. I mean, I like to think that it does. And I feel like when I watch back through to do show notes or pull clips or whatever, that I feel it. There's something there about two people that want to be there and they want to talk about things that are meaningful or, again, exploratory or helpful, you know, whatever it is. That's, you know, and this goes back to, again, the beginning, sitting here going, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And this not being a show, like, it's not, well, we don't have to worry about what we're going to talk about because both you and I did our homework and we were good little producers and came up with topics for the first segment and the whatever. And we created a structure for the show because then we don't have to worry about moments where we sit down and go, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I don't think we really ever sit here too and just like, well, where do we go now? It's always very natural. Like, it carries, okay, we're going to go here. We're going to go here. Like, there's always a thread to pull.
Well, what's interesting is when it started off too, I don't know that you had gotten to a place where you're like, oh, this is the show. This is the episode. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I'm like, I like this. Let's just get into this right now.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me.
Well, it's kind of,
and you have to kind of catch up, or
with documentary,
take my lead.
Always keep the camera rolling.
Right.
Kind of just learn.
Yeah.
you've got to just
ABR,
let the camera
always be
roll.
rolling.
Always be rolling. No, but we learned that over time.
Yeah.
It's just like you just got to kind of get the camera rolling.
Well, and the other thing too is like you might be like, well, I don't know that we're ready to roll. Like I don't know that we're there yet. But it's like, well, who cares? Like you can edit it out if it's not, we can cut in later if it's not quite the start. That's ideal.
You can always find what I think it is interesting though. I think we should watch that. It's 288 minutes.
I would love to.
I think we should watch that, like maybe live stream that somehow. I think that would be really interesting.
That'd be wild.
Watch it with I don't know if anybody would be interested in watching that. But sometimes, it's like maybe we take an afternoon or something. We're like, hey, we're going to live stream this. I don't know what the technical aspects would look like there.
Or, another option is we sort of say, like, we're going to have a special episode where we have just watched this 288 minutes and then we immediately start talking about it after we're done watching it.
Yeah.
And just record it like this.
I don't even know if I'd want to do that. I was talking to Audrey about that the other night, or maybe a week or two ago, and just this, like, I hate this expectation when you leave a movie.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think?
We got to go talk about it.
Well, no. And like, sometimes I enjoy it. Like, I really enjoy, let's go grab a beer. Let's go grab a drink and talk about it. But at the same time, and, there's lower stakes with certain people. Like you and I can talk about it and it's just, we both kind of understand, okay, let's just talk about some observations.
Yeah, explore it. Like, what are your initial thoughts? First instance.
Some people,
feelings,
it's like, tell me.
Yeah, tell me
this meant, or like it's like, look, man, somebody spent 3 years of their life making this. I'm not going to be able to digest it in 12 minutes after we left the theater.
Well, I mean, I like, and I've said this before. Like, one of my favorite movies, The Shining. I'm like, I feel like I've had to watch that movie 20 times to really feel.
You've been
like
digesting it for 30 years.
Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I am just naturally someone, even when it comes to a book, a show, a movie, whatever. Sometimes I'll read these reviews, like the good reviews of a film that really, and I'm like, there's no way they watched that more than once, and they formulated these. Really, I mean, obviously it's something they do all the time. Like it's a muscle that they've exercised. Not that I don't analyze film or stories, maybe just not with any real structure. It's a little bit more stream of consciousness or free form. But like I need a lot of time. Yeah. I need to have not only sort of my gut reaction or my instinctive response. I need to sometimes go back and watch it 2-3 times. Mm-hmm. To just sort of double check, is that what I think that meant, or is that how that made me feel? And I definitely came away, just to throw it out there, the last movie I saw, The Brutalist, and not to get into it, but I came away with, more than just sort of general impressions or sort of how did I feel in general. I had some, well, this really meant to me what I saw with this, and then what this communicated to me, this moment, the end of the film, things like that. And there is a desire definitely to be like, well, I want to know what Alex thinks. Like I missed out on seeing that with you guys, but still looking forward to, if possible, to either see it again or to hang out with you and Alex, and even Eli and go, let's jam about this.
Yeah.
Like
there's something though to be said about, film as an experience, like film is a physical experience rather than just an intellectual experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
And a lot of times I love approaching a film just from the sense of, let's just see what this
take
thing,
it in, absorb it,
take a shower.
Yeah.
Like you're not really thinking about like, oh, what the water is made up of. And
right.
This is how, this is the temperature and this is what the components of the wall are made of. You just
there. Just be present with it.
Yeah. And I think that's something that gets a little bit lost when there's this tendency to
like work at it,
be a critic, or create some,
or I want to signal to my friends that I really like understood this in a profound way, so I'm really going to work hard to absorb it, and then when I sit down and talk, I'm gonna have some real cogent
kind
points.
Kind of ruins the the experience a little bit. In my opinion, I know some people love that, and I think it's different for everybody. But a long way of saying, I think maybe we consider doing like a watch of that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Then, maybe we do an episode on it. I don't know how we would even do that. I don't even know if anybody that listens to this would
but the beauty is
interested.
The beauty is this conversation hatches that idea.
Yeah.
We think about it. We ruminate about it.
Yeah.
Maybe we even do it and we go, whatever. Like it's an
don't
idea.
Have 288 minutes on flip cam, so we would have to
120 only.
120. So we would have to.
We get 3 more. We set them right next to each other, and when 120 minutes, when the red light goes off, we hit the second flips.
It'd be interesting though. Yeah, it's a film I've watched. It's like Napoleon, like the silent Napoleon, not the new
not
Napoleon.
the Ridley Scott Napoleon.
It's just a film that I've started over and over and over and just never
haven't finished.
Worked all the way through it. Yeah. I mean, because it is it's an experience. It's home video footage. Some of it's very brief. But I think that'd be a fun. It just fits well with the idea of the show.
Well, and I think too, it's what's interesting is absorbing work that doesn't have a traditional, what we would think is sort of a traditional form. Well, this isn't, you just said, like, the thing that we're talking about is that it's 288 minutes, right? Like, we're acknowledging that this is very long.
Yeah.
And that's different than most documentary films or films that you watch. Even The Brutalist, like, sort of, people are going in knowing that there's an intermission, that it's almost 4 hours long. And that has an impact
but even that, like, that has a very cohesive narrative structure, and it's more like a more traditional, like, okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then we're moving into the second act, and we're moving into the third act, and whereas this is yes, it has narrative structure in the sense that life has a narrative structure, and maybe part of that is just you present information, and then the viewer is going to dictate the structure.
But I think what's exciting about that is, again, whether he sort of like decided early on, I'm going to document, our lives for 30 years and then make something out of it.
Yeah.
At some point that maybe came up and he maybe was more disciplined about recording in different situations and whatnot. But again, I don't want this to sound self-congratulatory, but part of what I think makes me sit down every week to do this is not only the connection with you and the conversations we have, but I think I just really like the idea of what this is. That's interesting to me. And I think when I'm sitting down making something that I think about, I'd like to see other versions of this. I want to see, there's a YouTuber, and it's not a podcast, obviously, where, there's conversation, but she vlogs. Her name's CQ Lucius, and she's a musician who has had to go into sort of real, like, adult life. She's in her 30s, and she had to get a job. She had to move out from her parents' house and just sort of like figure out life, not as a struggling artist trying to make it as a musician. And she's documenting that process. And your first thought is, this is just another YouTuber vlogging about stuff, but just like this could be looked at as another podcast. And again, I don't want to get self-congratulatory.
But there's something different. It's kind of like when I talked to you about all the pipe videos, like there's something a little more pure. Just, it's like vlog in the very traditional sense of vlog.
Yes.
Not vlog in like, I'm going to try to get 1 million followers.
Right.
It's just like,
well, even in her early episodes, she had a structure. She started because there was like a challenge where you made a video. You took a letter of the alphabet. You went through every letter of the alphabet, and you came up with a word that starts with A. That's like the thesis or central topic of your episode. But then she got through Z, and sort of like it has evolved and been a little bit freer, but more interesting. Both were interesting, but more interesting because it doesn't have this structure imposed on it.
Yeah.
And I think
that was like a way in.
Yeah. And so what's interesting to me is we have a superstructure that is two guys that really want to talk to each other once a week and document it, and talking about stuff within this framework, art and the creative life and all that. Doing this thing.
And we have our little practice. Like we have our little rituals. We pour the water.
Right.
If it's Friday, we'll pick whiskey.
Yeah.
Like if it's where's the coffee, like the candles.
There's these sort of characters in the world of what we're doing. The point being is just those types of things interest me. And don't get me wrong, I've referenced Rick's podcast and Smartless. I like all of that stuff. You know?
I don't think they're the same though, for sure.
No, 100%. But I like things that are more of a what some might argue as a show, like a traditional show, an interview show, a talk show, whatever, and granted Rick and, even Smartless though, like they have their little intro banter and all the stuff that they do. And then they have their conversation with the guest and then they have their post talk. Like, and I think audiences would be like, if they broke from that form, they'd be like, where's my show?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not saying that we don't have forms, like you're pointing out, there's sort of these elements that are characters in the world.
There's an element to the conversation too, and
but this goes back. If we change the shit, if we not necessarily what we talk about, but if we changed even the banner and the logo or whatever, the avatar, whatever the fuck it's called, like what does that do? Because we don't have an opening segment, Alex's monologue, and then the books that we're reading, and this segment and that segment. We don't have that kind of stuff. But there are still elemental ingredients of what we're doing here, and going back to part of what the beginning of this was, why did we think about changing it?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, like if you get away from why you're doing it in the first place, then it just I think it just all comes down to just like what is, I don't know. See, I'm having this conflict between, part of me almost feels like guilty of trying to nail this down too much. Like we're doing too much Monday morning quarterback right now.
Yeah. And to me, again, I don't know that I want to nail it down, but it's like, it's more, I wonder what are the forces at play in, and having a moment of inspiration or an instinct or whatever to make a change. And I don't think we have to come up with the answer. We don't have to go, well, we were insecure about whether what we were making was a show enough, or if the look of it was this enough or that enough, or signaling, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
I just sit there and go.
I think part of it too is I very much, signaling and commercialization and just like the expectation for that.
Yeah.
I think that probably had some part of it, but we were both kind of clear with our reasoning, and we've had discussions about this in private many times, even on the show many times. But I think part of it is there is like a boredom.
Yeah, a desire for novelty.
Not a boredom in the experience of creating it,
right,
but just a boredom in like, oh man,
I see this thing over and over.
Exactly. And so
there's nothing different, or
I want a different cover.
Yeah.
I want, I want to look at something different. But then almost at a certain point, it becomes hard to think of it looking any different.
Right.
Like it doesn't serve it to change it.
Yep.
I had a point that I wanted to. I shouldn't have. I just cleared it off, and I was looking to try to see if I could find it, and I wanted to come back to it, and I totally lost it.
Sorry about that.
No. We were it was right in the. I'm trying to go back. It was what you were just saying, and then I went to pull something, and I lost it.
And I feel like I'm too right now to bring you back in.
We'll see if it comes. If it doesn't. But no, I think the quality of just whatever comes to mind, whatever whatever we're here to talk about is what comes out of our mouth. That is the essence of the whole thing.
Well, and I think too, something that's interesting about this conversation going in this direction is there might even be something like a word that keeps coming up into my head right now is like insecurity. Okay. And I'm not saying that you having some inspiration to change the look of the channel came from any kind of insecurity.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here thinking, although I could make an argument that maybe there was an element of that. Like I keep seeing the same thing over and over. We have to refresh this, or this isn't new enough. I'm insecure about what the audience, wants, or what I want to see are the look of this show be, whatever. And I wonder too, if part of me having a little insecurity or questioning or wondering or whatever is like, what is this? What are we doing? And is there something in me psychologically, subconsciously that almost wanted to have a conversation about it, not to nail things down, because that sounds like, well, okay, now we know what it is, and there's no fluidity or freeness to it at all. But part of me is like, what is this, or what's it going to end up being? And you even talking about like, we've talked about this, like, how cool is it to have a documentation of these conversations? But when you put it in the context of like, what if we did this for 20 years? Like, I never thought about that. That's fascinating to me. We've talked too about like, I would love to stumble across my dad having a podcast with one of his close friends. And, there's 5 years of conversations that I can just watch of my dad. Mm-hmm. Like that'd be about like serious stuff. Yeah.
And also just like a clear progression of thought. Like, again, just watch the episode.
Yeah.
And I find it. Yeah.
Okay, he's got it. Let's go.
No.
Let's go.
So I was just the idea of with making this film of 30 years of life moments was like such a novelty.
Yes.
And now it's commonplace.
Right. Many of us are going to have decades potentially
of online material
content that we've generated about ourselves
and
I in my video about my studio tour, I went back and I was surprised. Hold on to where you're going. And in sort of telling the backstory of why I overhauled my studio, I went back to footage that was 7 years old of me holding a camera in my basement, filming all this crap all over the place. Tight
haircut. And
going, like, talking about what this space is going to be used for as a production company owner and all this stuff, like, and that was fascinating to see where my head was at 7 years ago with what I was intending that space to be and what it is now, which I never would have guessed. And same thing with this, right? Like, we're going to have conversations, and 7 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 months from now, we're going to go, I didn't think we were going to go down these rabbit holes and what impact it would have on us. And
I haven't rewatched any of the episodes yet.
And I've only rewatched them in the sense of having to go through them for show notes. Yeah, it's very close.
Obviously, I rewatched editing them. But after it goes out, I haven't rewatched a single episode.
And if I have,
like, going back, like, maybe I'll watch through some of the YouTube episode or something to make sure that, like, we had audio issues for a couple of weeks there. But I haven't, like, I'm going to go back and revisit episode 3. I just haven't done that.
Yep.
But yeah, the I don't want to hijack the point.
No. I finished it. That was
because I mean, you're talking about, okay, I went back 7 years. Like, if you can have that long vision and, like, I don't look at this. Most people, they are looking through this commercial lens, and they're looking at this as like 6 months, a year.
Mm-hmm.
2 years, and I'll have 1 million followers.
Yeah.
And there's like these unrealistic or just commercial expectations put on the thing. The vlog or the channel you talked about, or I think
CQ Lucius,
And so when I was in, I mean, it was probably 2009 was when I found there was this channel. He still makes videos. I think his name's Chris. Don't quote me on that, but his channel name is CC Runner. And I remember watching this guy's videos when I think he was in high school. Mm-hmm. And then he like moved to Hawaii. Yeah. And like was trying to run college cross country and then he finished his like thing and went and did, races and went to, I guess, med school or pharmacy school or like, I literally like, it's just him holding a phone. He walks around his house. He still does the same exact thing. Still vlogs the exact same way. Yeah. 16 years later. Yep. He's put up videos in the last couple of months. And he's got maybe, 3,000 subscribers. Mm-hmm. He never lost it. Like he never lost, his vision was never, I'm going to get on here and I'm going to try to get 1 million followers. Mm-hmm. Or I'm going to try to be, YouTube Steven Spielberg or anything like that. Right. He just wanted to kind of document himself. That's right. Over time and kept it completely pure. I assume kind of like what you were talking about, which is now,
part of the fascination of it.
And I've been following him for 60, like he's like a family member. Right. Like I've been following him and like as he walks around his houses and like talks about goals or talks about his life or like what he's doing or where he's moving. He's moved from state to state to state to state to like house to house to house to house. Talked about like different relationships, and it's just an odd relationship that you have with a person over time. And he just never lost. He never stopped because he was never doing it for fame or anything like that. And so by way of that, I can scroll on his channel back to those 2009 videos and watch those and remember when I was watching those 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I can scroll up to the videos that he put out last week. Mm-hmm. And I can and that is like the coolest experiment in my mind. And most people, we talk about all this content that's out and how it's not as rare to like have these whole movies or whatever, because it's just everybody's got it. But most people are doing it from a perspective of, I'm putting this out to get attention. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a lot of people that are doing it. And there's more now. Yeah. Because now we've lived with it for a couple of generations, and you can have people that look back and they're like, oh man, that, like when it is, you just do keep it level the whole time. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. Just as a documentation experience. Absolutely, yes. And so I think we're going to see more and more as time moves on and these storage becomes cheaper. It becomes easier to, but, never did it so he was able to keep it consistent. Yep. And he's been putting up videos for 16 years now.
Which is, and that's just fascinating.
And you can just trace it all the way. Yeah. And you feel like you've been with him. The settings change over time, but same guy. And it
makes me want to go rewatch The Truman Show, just to see like what
a life observed.
Yeah, especially because that was really pre-internet
I'm
as
so
we know
happy
it.
that this came back to me, by the way, because I was like, and that wasn't like a very profound point or anything.
No, but
this, I just wanted, I think of this, I don't know why this guy's channel. I'm sure there's plenty of channels that have done the same.
But there's something fascinating about like this guy doesn't care like what happens in the traditional sense of why people make a show. Yeah. He, from what you can tell, he is just personally interested in documenting his life. Yeah. And again,
and not from I'm going to get attention. Like you can almost just feel it in the way that the videos come off of just like, he just enjoys this.
Right. And I think that's what happens with what we're making. And again, not trying to be self-congratulatory and, oh, we're so great and groundbreaking and all this stuff, but it's literally like, we don't give a shit if ultimately we have 600 subscribers in 5 years. And there's something fascinating about...
I want to be the CC runner of podcasts.
Yeah. There's something fascinating to me about people who do something without what we expect traditionally as desired outcomes. We just want to talk to each other and document it. Yeah. And if it doesn't go beyond that, there's no, whereas with my main channel, there is an element of that. Like I do want to gain
big element of like exposure.
I want to gain subscribers. I want to earn more revenue.
And you can still go back and watch your older videos and it's interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not as, I could go back and watch Matt from that channel.
Yeah.
I'm not going to understand Matt from 7 years ago.
Right.
The same way I would going back to watch him from like 7 years ago.
And that's the other thing too, is my channel in 2018 when I started, and I talk about that in my latest video.
Business. It
was how can I use YouTube and documenting what we do as a production company as a tool to make more to make more business, right? That's the Gary V, the whole thing, right? And already had I like this. I like documenting things, because what's funny is, and this is kind of coming full circle, I'm realizing this, I can go back to home videos of me filming me getting ready to go to college and filming stuff at college. You couldn't do anything with that back then. I have VHS stuff of my classmates, but I'm talking to camera. I'm basically vlogging, right, with a giant VHS camcorder. And what's interesting about watching it is there was no other desire but to just document life and maybe to sort of like be the version of me that was there in front of a camera, like there's a little bit of like, but
there was no expectation that was going,
but it wasn't going to nothing was going to happen with it. It was just going to go on my shelf. I couldn't digitize it. I couldn't edit it. I couldn't put it on the internet. There was nowhere for it to go, but I still did it for a whole year.
It's interesting to tie into like the video quality here, because it kind of carries that spirit.
Oh, it looks exactly the same.
Of there's no reason.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, now we can put it up. We can put it out there. But
is that purity of intention? I don't know. I want to say, is that the show? And I mean, just in the sense of like,
I think that's what's important about, and this is the point I was trying to make a minute ago when I completely had my brain shut off because I was trying to remember.
Yeah.
I remember my my semi non sequitur here, but I think the whole thing is just when the intention is just when you just let it arise organically.
Yeah.
It's always going to be more interesting than if you try to build it.
Yeah.
If you
try to craft something. Craft something that.
And it's exactly what we talked about at the beginning of this episode, and we've talked about it on other episodes, or before we started rolling, we've talked about on other episodes, like there's a limit to like the human intellect.
Yeah.
And usually when you just embrace whatever is, call it the unconscious, subconscious, whatever, just when you embrace that spirit or that energy, it's always going to be more interesting than if you try to completely just grind through it with intellect.
So let me ask you this then. And this goes back to what, I don't know if we were recording when we talked about this, but we talked about like monetizing and ads, or like, sort of a commerce aspect coming into this, what we're doing. Can this, what we're doing, be corrupted? Would those forces corrupt it?
I'm monetizing this thing as soon as I get a shot.
You know what I mean? Like, is there something that could happen? Because here's sometimes what happens with these collaborations, right? A switch flips for one person in the equation.
Yeah.
Where, we started this with this sort of like innocent and pure intention to just document these conversations, but I saw a financial opportunity and I realized we were gaining this or had this or got attention, or some show picked us up. These guys have been documenting their conversations for 3 years, blah, blah, blah. And I see some opportunity for that, and my intentions to sit down and talk to you switch. Yeah. It switches from, I just want to talk to my buddy Alex.
I think as soon as it is like...
Is it fucked then? With
100%. Yeah. I mean, like, do I think if we were
is
like...
Is it likely?
If we were like, we're going to start a Patreon or something.
Yeah.
That's less fucked. But as soon as we're not uploading this... ourselves.
Right.
Or we're not like, as soon as we are like sponsor brought to you by,
right,
it's fucked.
It's
done.
fucked. Right.
It's done.
Because then like
if there's listeners and they're like, I'd love to support.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, this was really cool.
Right.
That's one thing.
That's one thing.
In my head, I mean, I'm not trying to like force my opinion onto what I'm curious as to what you think. But in my head, like that's one thing. But yeah, if it's like Matt and Alex's studio sessions brought to you by State Farm,
right?
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, that. Like that's not
and
what
now
this
a message
is.
from our sponsor.
Not what this is.
Right.
It's toast at that point.
I know. Yeah.
And like, oh, we would love to sign on as a sponsor. We'd like to sponsor 2 episodes a quarter.
Right.
It's done.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean,
or if it did, we all of a sudden had 80,000 subscribers, and even if we weren't doing sponsorships and all that stuff, what results in the world of having, putting what we're doing on YouTube, what results corrupt the purity of just 2 people sitting down to document conversation?
I don't think, I'll be honest, we could have 100,000 subscribers right now and I wouldn't know unless you told me.
Yeah.
I'll usually check the subscriber count, and more so lately I'll check it less.
Yeah.
Because we've had a couple of bursts, and so I'm like, I don't really want to be involved in trying to. So when I upload the podcast to our
Platform,
feed,
yeah,
I'll see it then, and I'll be like, oh, okay, month, week, whatever, and I get an email about it every month or whatever. Here's your monthly studio sessions report or whatever, and I'll see that. I've checked the YouTube thing a couple of times this month or last month or whatever. So yeah, we could have 100,000 subscribers and
right.
And I still want to just this
and so that is not a force that would potentially corrupt the thing.
On my side,
right.
I don't know. Maybe,
and that's the thing. So we watch you watch or read a biopic about a band or someone. I just watched the Priscilla movie where about Priscilla
Presley.
Yeah, Priscilla Presley, the Sofia Coppola movie and all that. And obviously you're picking up with Elvis in that film when he's already famous. He's in the military and he's stationed in Germany and all that stuff. But, how did, you even saw the corrupting forces that, that impacted Elvis. The colonel coming in and seeing how he could take what Elvis was doing and turn it into a business and really do some things to manipulate and control Elvis and all that stuff. A person sets out to make music, and Elvis did it without this, well, I'm going to use music to get famous. Mm-hmm. He wanted to make music and he got famous. And then things get it turns into this machine, Kurt Cobain and so this me throwing these things out there is just sort of I think the question I'm getting at after all of this conversation is what forces, and this is I'm asking rhetorically, what forces end up corrupting those pure intentions when people set out to make something just because they want to make this thing.
Well, the other thing too is I don't think this is really a format and or a there's so many things that kind of push against the idea that this thing would ever be some huge corrupting force.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's a massive audience out there.
No, absolutely. It's not
really wants
right.
to. Yeah.
And we're not,
which is, it's almost like you build in the restraint at the beginning,
right?
And just the way that it's just, this is not going to be appealing to a large audience,
right?
Most likely.
Yeah.
And, so part of it's I don't know if we're gonna have to worry about a lot of that because it's just the format itself kind of
Yeah.
prevents that from.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue anything's possible.
Yeah.
While I agree with you,
Well,
the
obviously,
likelihood,
that's the
the
American
likelihood
way, right?
of us
It's
being
like-
as big
like
as
we're gonna win the
Elvis,
lottery,
the
like-
likelihood of us being as big as Elvis is very,
And
very,
obviously,
very
like,
low.
there's a part of both of us, I'm sure, that's like, oh man, well, wouldn't it be great if we could just do this? But then, it paid us each,
yeah.
this was our salary. Like,
Right.
this is all we had to do. Like,
But I think
obviously there's a part of that to everything we do, which is a conversation in of itself, and a conversation we've had before. But
so here's something that was interesting. I watched the documentary on Elvis on Netflix about his 1968 comeback special, and the Colonel's got his hands on it. Elvis wants to do this comeback special, and he sort of has this desire to get back to basics, right? And go back to singing some of the music that he had gotten away from, and to sort of change the trajectory of his career. And the Colonel gets involved, and he wants them to do all these dumb skits and sketches that are kind of reminiscent of all the kind of the dumb movies he was doing and all of that stuff. And I say dumb as in Elvis, got to the point where he thought they were all dumb and trash, but the Colonel manipulated him, and you have these contracts, you have to do them, and he didn't think he had a choice. And Elvis is just frustrated with all these sketches and all the rehearsals and all that stuff. And so in this downtime, they're in the dressing room, and he's got his old bandmates from like his early days of playing, Jailhouse Rock and all that stuff. And when they're in the dressing room, they all have their instruments, and they're just jamming. They're just playing, and he's playing gospel songs, and he's playing what he is
doing the
he
pure
is
version
the pure
of the thing.
And the director of the whole special comes in, and he's like, "What the hell is this?" And he's like, "This is the show." And immediately wants to incorporate this. And there's like a whole segment. I haven't watched the special. I can't wait to watch it. But there's a whole segment.
It's just terrible.
Where Elvis is sitting there with those bandmates, like making the shit up as they go.
Yeah.
Which is like, right? Like television's worst nightmare.
Especially in 1968.
68.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you guys are just going to sit around and figure it out? Like,
Yeah.
we can't do that. But it's everybody's favorite part of the whole show because it's pure.
Yeah.
And he like stumbles, he messes up. He's like nervous and talking to the audience. Like it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Whereas like they'll show footage of this dumb skits that the Colonel wanted them to do, and you're just like, this is such fake artifice bullshit.
Yeah.
And it honestly goes back a little
Well,
bit.
I think that's part of like
that too.
This is, it's like sometimes we're just not like there's times in every we've gone through 40 conversations now. It's like sometimes you're tired, sometimes I'm tired, sometimes we're both tired, sometimes we're not as fired up, or sometimes we're super fired up,
right?
And there's like the complete opposite energy, or like sometimes there's there's a moment of brain fog, or you've got something else on your mind. Like we've both been through situations where our head is probably somewhere else, but then we're like still like all of those things. You're not trying to cover any of that up, and what seems like it might be this is a mistake, or this is a moment that needs to be edited out. Right. Is actually
that's right.
That's
right.
That's the most interesting.
This part drags a little bit, or you guys don't.
It's the scratch on the record.
That's right.
And you're like, oh wow, well that scratch is actually the thing.
The character of it all, or the standard definition. You're like, well, we just need something that doesn't have a lot of data. Yeah. But then you realize like the sort of roughness of it, or the softness of it, it's like,
especially
that's
some of these episodes, man, they have been, when we are shooting, and it like, especially in the winter episodes when it's dark early, and in the summer episodes it's daylight on most of them, everything's well lit, right. There are some of these where it's like the cameras are on the very edge, like everything's crackly and broken up, and
so I think the thing that's interesting to me is, and this is just like wanting.
We're at an hour and 40, by the way, so I don't know what we're cutting out, but a lot's gonna have to get cut out probably just to,
or it doesn't,
Or not. This would be the longest episode by like 20 minutes, though. So
who cares, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
We shall
Anyway,
see.
I wonder too. Elvis, Kurt Cobain. People that set out to make something with like from a place of real purity, and then other forces come into play. Of their choosing, they pushed it in that direction, or it sort of happened to them. I would hope that we never got to a point with this where something happened and we went, remember when we just used to sit in your apartment and we just sat there and chopped it up?
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we get back to that? Is that possible?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think maybe everybody's like, oh, you don't feel it, and then you're all of a sudden in a different place.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, you hope that the people that actually, like, there are some people that watch these pretty frequently.
Right.
It's like hopefully those people hold these to account.
Yeah.
But then, who knows? I mean, that's kind of the thing, though. Like, there's no point in pondering on, oh, what if this happens and what if this happens? Because it's like, well, right now, this is happening. This is it. There is no, like, what if. It's just, what are we going to talk about next week?
Yeah.
I am interested, though. We talked briefly about some of these channels and certain documentaries. I think I'm more familiar in the documentary space, but I'd love to see, like, if there's any channels that people watch that have.
Yes, please.
I mean, we asked for like podcast recommendations, but also if there's any like YouTube channels, or some people self-host on websites. If there's any websites or
something
where
people are making something and it feels like,
and they've been doing it for a long
time, or you just feel like they're not trying to get famous or make money. Like they're just making something from a pure place or whatever. At least that's my personal interest.
I would love to just observe some, like, there's different communities where this is definitely present.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can think of, a couple. There's this one guy I used to watch. I think he just makes like Madden videos. Yeah. And I don't even have a console or anything. Like, I haven't played Madden in years. Yeah. But I used to watch his videos when I was younger, and he's been making Madden videos for like 12 years. And I think he gets like 10 views a video, maybe.
It'd be cool.
And like, I mean, I literally think he's probably got like 4,000 subs or something. But I mean, literally, I think he gets like 5-10 views a video. Okay. Like very low, but I see him pop up. He releases videos every week. He's never stopped for, a decade plus.
So maybe that's
how cool is that? Like he's just like putting him out there to like.
Yeah, I know.
It's just amazing. Like I don't know. That's exciting. That's the part of the internet where I'm like, man, there's still something very cool here. No matter how corrupted it gets, it's like as long as there are things like that, it's like, man, that's kind of the original spirit of the internet.
So
it's really cool.
That one comment you talked about earlier, like you guys are whatever.
I didn't mean to respond to that, and like that's not. I wasn't responding in a negative way. Like, obviously, I appreciate anybody's willing to interact, and I wanted to recontextualize kind of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And so what I'm getting at is that guy's comment was like, blah blah blah. You guys should make a movie together. Just pitching this, and not, who knows what it'll be. Like, what if that's one of the things that we're supposed to make is we go to these corners of the internet where people have been uploading videos for 12 years, even if there's only 9 views a video, and we just
why do you do this?
Talk to them about where it comes from.
That'd be a fun. We've always talked about doing like extra episodes or something, or like how can we incorporate
or a guest
interviews
or something.
That would be a fun way to incorporate that, because that is something I would like to do.
Yep.
Maybe it's not a guest, or I don't know how we would do that, but I would love to
extend the wondering,
just to be like, why are you doing
other people?
This?
Yeah, we're wondering what's all behind this, like, and we just want to hear from you, like, what's the deal?
That but not would be disrespectful. Like, you have to tell the line, no. You don't want to be like,
it's not. Hey, dude, your videos suck, and you only get 9 views a video. Why the fuck are you uploading these for 12 years? It's. I don't know. There's a little bit of like maybe there's a shared a shared experience there with the purity of intentionality behind sitting down and just making something because you want to, and you're not thinking about traditional results, or they're not the thing driving you, because if you're not getting them, which YouTube gurus would look at your channel and tell you everything you're doing wrong to not have a million this and all this shit. But we don't want you to do that. So why are you doing this? And not because we don't think you should be, or that it doesn't make sense that you are. We have an idea, not that we're on rails or anything, but we have some insights as to why maybe you are, but we want to hear it from you. Do you even know?
Yeah.
I don't even think about it.
I think it's so easy to, we have these forms of media that it's easy to kind of contextualize things into the show.
Yeah.
One of them, the film, the novel, the short story, the blog post.
Yeah.
The vlog. Now, there's just all of these kind of, I think there's something that maybe isn't as obvious, but it's just like, I don't really know what I'm trying to say here, but there's just this like essence to whenever I talk about early internet, or like the spirit of the internet.
Yes.
Like that's the part of me that is like geeks out over that stuff. This is what I'm talking about.
And I think that's
it's like these small communities, or these small, I used to love Reddit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's absolutely just deteriorated now.
Right.
But I used to love it, like when it was like these small little, and it's not like, then it got popular and it got lame. Like that's not what I'm saying. But it lost.
It got commercial?
It got corrupted.
Yeah, but this is what I'm talking about.
And it not because it got big, because it changed its approach to.
That's right. It perhaps went from something not like a declared mission, but sort of a purity of intention.
Yeah.
To, well, hey, this is something now. Same thing, I mean, it's like the first thing I thought of was, a social network with Facebook. There's sort of like, that thing was crafted not because, well, I have a business plan.
Yeah.
It came from an interesting place. Obviously the movie's dramatizing something that may not be true, but at least the way it was dramatized was an interesting place. And then you get that line from the one guy, like, well, we don't know what this is yet. So the one kid wants to bring in advertising, the other one doesn't know yet. You know what I mean? And then it turns into this whole other thing, right? Yeah. But what you're saying is, that part though, the early part is interesting.
It's almost its own subgenre in all of these things.
Yes.
Where it's just, regardless of the medium, it's just this. And I don't think size is necessarily a determinant either. I'm sure there's examples of this where the people are incredibly successful, or completely the opposite. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying like it has to be some small. But yeah, there's like a purity metric, or like it's its own genre almost of all of these things, where it's just like,
well, and there's other corrupting forces besides just sort of commerce or getting big, right? Like having attention or fame, being able to monetize something, seeing like, oh, well, actually Facebook isn't a sort of a way for us to connect with people on college campuses. It's a way to get everybody's personal information and advertise to them in a better way. Like it changed its identity, right? And not to make this about Facebook, but there's musicians or other people that make stuff and maybe their insecurity is corrupting, and not saying that our exploration of changing the look of the channel came from insecurity, but you could argue that even having a thought of changing it is a little bit of a corruption of what it is. Like, hey, don't change. You like what you have is good.
It's
like,
it's
just
fine.
leave it.
Just leave
like,
it alone.
don't fuck with it. So what force? And that's why I asked. Like, what do you think the force was that made you get inspired or decide to even whip something up? Was it the excitement that the tools are so readily available and interesting to use that we can whip up a whole new brand using AI tools and the stuff that we had going on, and that the seduction of that was the corrupting force in changing it. You didn't stop to think whether or not you could, whether or not you should,
whether or not we actually should,
right.
Get so caught up in the fact that we could,
So these
it's
forces.
funny, there's this Buddhist concept that I actually wrote. I made this note today.
Yeah,
it's called the 5 hindrances, and it's like forces that get you to which didn't. This is not planned.
Absolutely not, but it all connects.
So like there's 5 hindrances, and I think this is the traditional 5. I'm not completely well versed, obviously, in what these are. Just made this note, so
but
it's desire and craving, aversion, dullness, restlessness.
Yep, those were there.
And doubt.
And doubt, So insecurity. Now this is this is what this show is about. This show is about these conversations connecting. You had this in your phone. You didn't think twice about how this might relate to what we're making here, changing the brand, any of that shit, right? You can see the connection once we talk about it, and that's the stuff that's exciting. Is you have these conversations from what you're reading, what you're watching, what you're talking about, what you wrote down in the notes app, and you start seeing all the connective tissue between them. And that is as good as it gets, in my opinion.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.